And we're live.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Community Safety and Wellbeing Steering Committee meeting, May 21st, 2021. I'll ask the clerk to do a roll call, please.
Chair Moffat.
Present.
Warden Danielson.
Present.
Councillor DeVolen.
Present.
Councillor Burton.
Present.
Councillor Roberts.
Present.
And Detachment Commander Collins.
Here.
That's everyone.
Great. Thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the agenda? Councillor DeVolen, and I'm sorry, I'm missing some faces on the screen here. So just bear with me.
I'll second it.
Somebody, thank you. Thank you, Liz. DeVolen and Danielson.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Warden Danielson. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Steering Committee agenda be approved.
All in favor? Uh-oh, everybody froze. All in favor? Am I frozen or is it okay? Everybody's hands are in the air. That is carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today from members of council? Seeing none, can I have a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the previous minutes? Councillor Roberts, Warden Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Warden Danielson. Be it resolved that the minutes from the April 12th, 2021 meeting of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Steering Committee be hereby approved.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. There is no business arising, just item number 7, new business, and I will hand it over to Strategy Corps. Welcome, everybody from Strategy Corps.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren, who is going to call up a deck and lead us through it and take you through a bit of a discussion.
Absolutely. Okay. So thank you all for taking the time to meet with us again today. We have a pretty straightforward agenda to go through today. Last time we spoke to all of you, it came out loud and clear that there was a focus and emphasis on the OPP Detachment Board composition and size and the link between it and the CSWB planning process. So we wanted to take a moment today to talk through some of that, as well as talk a little bit about the advisory committee composition. I understand that that is going to a separate meeting on the 26th to be discussed. So there may not be too much conversation on that item, but either way, we can review the criteria and answer any questions that you may have as you go into that session. And then finally, we're going to cover our plan for stakeholder communications and engagement and just give you an overview of who we plan on speaking to and when, as well as getting some of your feedback and making sure that we've captured everybody accurately and take any additional feedback that you may have. Okay, we'll continue on then. Great.
Yep, just carry on unless you need me to share something.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so jumping into the OPP and Detachment Board, we've framed up a slide here that just kind of lays out what the requirements are. The left side won't be particularly new if you've looked at the MCSCS's requirements before, but this just kind of gives you the greatest hits of what is expected of the board and what their responsibilities will be. We are lucky to have Matt Tarigian here, who was able to get a little bit of clarity on the actual composition and the ratios of membership. And he also was able to get a little bit of clarity on the connection between the CSWB and the Detachment Board and how one has to flow from another, if at all. So maybe I'll just pass it over to Matt to give us a little bit of an update on what he's heard. And then from there, we can talk a little bit about what we want the composition for Haliburton to look like.
Thanks, Lauren, and good afternoon, everyone.
I was able to have a number of conversations with people that are actually close to putting together the policy and leading the direction of a lot of this. And maybe we should start first with the connection or the potential connection between the Detachment Board and the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. There really isn't a direct tie. There would be an opportunity for the Detachment Board and its representatives to be very, very much apprised of the plan, the objectives, the risks that have been identified in the plan and the action plan that flows from that. The Detachment Board representatives, and you'll see is in the following slides where we put together some options, would have a significant municipal representation, and by that I mean elected officials. And so it would make sense that we have public policy being developed. You have a detachment board that is working very closely with the detachment commander and the commissioner. We have action plans laid out as far as what the community safety and wellbeing plan needs to prioritize. And there is that obvious connection, but not directly. In other words, there's no need to wait for the plan to be developed before you're going to select the optimum size for the county as well as its representatives. There really isn't a direct connection. Maybe I'll stop there in case you have any questions, and then we can speak to the various options that are up on the slide now.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, go ahead, Matt, keep going.
Okay, thanks. So now we see there are three different options here. I mean, as we saw, the minimum board size is 5. Although there are 5, 7, or 9 options, there is an opportunity for some municipalities to actually look for larger boards. And that would be in areas where that particular OPP detachment is, in fact, servicing 14, 15, sometimes 16 different municipalities. And it may be for that area to either have more than one detachment board or, in fact, have a larger board and a larger representation. Manitoulin is an example of that. But in this particular case, for Haliburton, we think that you take a look at the 3 options there, 5, 7, or 9. I was able to get clarity from the ministry. So using let's say the middle one, 7 people on the board, that would potentially have the representative, the mayor from each municipality plus the warden, which is 5. That's your base. And now that 20% number that we hear about is 20% of the base. Therefore, in this particular example, 1 provincial appointee, because 20% of 5 is 1, and 1 community rep. If you move to a larger board, the one below 9, for example, and what we have on the slide is 2 provincial appointees, 2 community reps, because you just want more community reps, they wouldn't necessarily force the hand to put 2 provincial appointees on that board. You could, in fact, have 3 community reps, 1 provincial appointee, because 20% of 5 again is 1, but you wanted additional community reps, and you could put 3 community reps on that board. And therefore you get to a board of 9. And then I know I'm not doing this in order, but if you went up to the first option of a 5-member board, and you're only looking at 2 elected officials as your base, then minimum 20% would be 1 for the provincial appointee. And again, this is where you would probably pick 2 community reps just to make sure that it's weighted at the local level, not the provincial level. And again, the ministry is not going to say, no, we want equal number of community reps and provincial appointees. as we've laid this out, you can see there are pros and cons that we've come up with for each. You may have other ideas or other thoughts, but our recommended board size would be 7. That way you get a mayor or municipal elected official from each municipality, doesn't need to be the mayor, and 1 from the county. We've laid out as an example 4 mayors, 1 warden, and then you end up with 1 provincial appointee and 1 community rep, and you can see what the pros and cons are. Any questions on this?
Anybody have any questions? Sorry, I'm back to a laptop, so I have to scroll a bit to get all the faces on the screen. I think that this has been laid out well. It certainly aligns with the information that I've had from the webinars and tables that I've been at. And there is tremendous concern about the provincial appointee aspect of this, because there's a huge gap in provincial appointees on police service boards right now. So there's tremendous public skepticism about the ability of the province to actually find people who are going to travel out to, rural or remote areas to participate in these boards. But we can't do anything about that. They did say after the last webinar, where there was 150 quite grumpy people, this was a big topic. The folks who were leading the discussion did say they would take it back, but I don't think there's going to be much change there. So I think we could probably expect that seat would remain vacant for some time, but it's required. So as far as I'm concerned, the seven makes the most sense. It allows the people who have to pay the bill to have the decision-making authority to keep costs where they need to be. And it's, as you said, it's optimal, it's efficient, it does allow for the community representation, and it seems to have the right people at the table. Any other thoughts from members of from the elected folks on the screen about 5, 7, or 9? Councillor Roberts, then Councillor DeVolen.
Yeah, it does say the mayors, and traditionally that's what we've done, except actually when I was deputy reeve, I served on CPAC. So I'm wondering, should it say mayor or deputy mayor? Like one or the other?
Yeah, it does say or other combination of elected officials. So it could be mayor or appointee, because
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. There could be somebody, as long as a municipality is represented by an elected official. I think that's the key.
Great.
And so the option of the 7 members mirrors the CPAC process that we've had. Of course, there's different duties and responsibilities involved, but it just expands it a little bit. Councillor DeVolen.
The 5, absolutely not. My inclination is the middle option as suggested. The larger board, I would have to be convinced, but I'm not at this time.
Yeah, and I think we have until June 7th, if I recall correctly, to advise the ministry what our setup's going to look like. But the board doesn't have to be physically in place and doing any work until later, I think. Matt, do you know when the board's supposed to be actually active?
I don't know, because they are working on the regulations, and I would think this is also going to line up with the enforce date of the act, and the act is not enforced yet. Just getting back to the provincial appointee reference that you made, Your Worship, and I think it's a good one. But it's good to remind ourselves that provincial appointee is a community person. It's a person of the community. It's just appointed through the process that the province goes through, which is traditionally why the delay, as opposed to council choosing the community rep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so fingers crossed then that it goes a little more smoothly through this process. So, well, I'd say that we're aligned with the 7 as presented here, and I think I don't know what's in the online form. That was one of the other complaints, and it was in the notes that I had shared from that meeting. Is a number of people there was concern that you couldn't know what was in the online form to fill in until you actually filled it in, but you wouldn't necessarily have the answers to fill in the form because you couldn't save it. Anyway, I hope they fix that. So we have until June 7th to submit this, but again, I don't know what else is in the form. I don't know what other information we need. Who will fill in the form to notify the ministry of the size and composition option that we've chosen? Is that something that the county will do, or is that something that Strategy Corps would do?
I don't know if Lauren or John want to jump in here.
I mean, we can do it. I mean, it's our board. We can do it.
I think they'd expect you to do it. I think they'd wonder why we were doing it.
Well, and they did have their, as far as I could get in the online form, I think as noted in the notes that I provided, is they hadn't considered a consolidated body. So they only had lower tier or single tier organizations listed. So they were going to add an option for other, because there was no Haliburton County in the drop down. So hopefully that's been fixed. So we can circle back, Mike, Mr. CAO, we can circle back on filling in that form prior to the 7th, if we're agreed on the 7th, which I think we are. So do you want to carry on then, Matt, or whoever's going to carry on from there?
I think, Lauren, are you, if we're finished this was just an example of some of the detachment boards across other municipalities. I'm not sure if we referenced Manitoulin. Blue Water is another example where there are 5 members, but you've landed on 7. It is the recommended number. Just personal experience, it also works. It's what the big 12 police services all use. So I think we can probably jump to the next slide.
Perfect. So we had originally booked this time thinking we were going to have a bit more of an expanded conversation around the advisory committee. I believe that most of this information was shared in our kickoff meeting when we last met, but having an advisory committee to actually inform the development of the plan is required by the ministry. And so I know that work has been done already to begin assembling a list to meet each of these criteria. So on the left, we have the responsibilities. I don't think I need to read through them in detail. And then on the right-hand side, a little bit about the size. There's no minimum or maximum. It's really to be reflective of the community. But it is required that there's at least one person that represents each of the groups delineated here on the right-hand side. So I know Mike. Oh, sorry. Did anyone have something to add in there? Okay. So I know that Mike has gotten to work on coming up with a draft list. So there isn't much to really speak about here today, but we thought that if there were any questions from the group, we could potentially answer them. So it sounds like you are all meeting May 26th to chat about the list and then go through an appointment process that is similar to what you do for all of your advisory committees, which is to reach out and then gauge interest, formally appoint through a closed council session and put it in bylaw. And then we had a point here about succession planning. It would be the steering committee or county council that would actually appoint the replacements, not the person who is leaving. So I can pause there. I don't know if there are any questions or if this is something that's going to be discussed in more detail on the 26th.
Any questions from anybody else? I would ask Lauren, can you just go back one slide?
Sure.
A person who represents the police service board or a detachment commander. Okay, because that was my question, and Dan's with us now, and he's interim, and it's no secret, and I'm not being disrespectful. We've had a bit of a revolving door with commanders in the Haliburton Highlands detachment, and in terms of consistency, I wanted some clarification on that, because we want to make sure that if it has to be the commander, or can the commander appoint somebody who may have a bit more longevity in the community to provide the policing support we need in this process. And again, I don't mean that to be disrespectful to anybody, but if you have a process that's underway, the whole safety and well-being plan is contingent upon on the ground and community knowledge, and that somebody new coming in in a commander job may not have that. They may. I mean, it has happened, but they may not. So that's some clarification that I had sought. Councillor DeVolen?
Yeah, and the other thing, I guess, with respect to that position is in recent history, a number of times is that the OPP seconds personnel from detachments, and that's irritating to say at a minimum. Is there any provision within that, and how do we deal with that? Because obviously if advisory committees or things going on and that's problematic, I just bring it up to the point of I'm not offering a solution. It just becomes if somehow in this process that it's not somebody that is gone for some months out of the community when we would have need of them.
Yeah, to the first point, I know, Matt, that you also dug into this a little bit. I'm not sure about the second point, but I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I was going to jump in because I think these are really valid issues and concerns that you're raising. I just say but I would think our recommendation is, if it would work for you, both the representation from the detachment board and the detachment commander, both on the advisory committee would make sense because you want to have both sides covered. To your question and your point around the lack of consistency, and this problem is persistent right across the board in policing. You get somebody that works with communities, work with agencies, they're doing really great work, they've developed tremendous relationships, and then all of a sudden they get transferred for a lot of good reasons. Professional development, other demands call on them to be moved. For the detachment commander, the key for the detachment board as well as this advisory committee is to have that conduit of information flow. You need that information coming into the committee and into the board, so much so that you can then make some really good decisions. So whether it's an interim commander, and Dan could probably speak to this, or the commander that's been there for a while, or a delegate of the detachment commander, as long as you're getting the information that you're going to need. Calls for service data, what certain priorities are, what they're hearing, and how it may impact some of the priorities and the plans that have been laid out. That would be, I would think, your first and foremost area of concern, and want to make sure that you get that information. But a delegate by the detachment commander, somebody that isn't moving from the community, would certainly serve this committee well.
That's great, thank you. And I think, if you bookend the advisory committee with a detachment board person and the commander, then you've just explained how we'd cover off for the policing side. It would be up to us to ensure that the person who from the detachment board that steps up is a bit of a keener, so they can make sure that those connections stay fresh. So we can manage that internally. So that's good. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions from anybody on this particular committee makeup? No, then we'll turn it back to you guys to carry on. Thank you. Okay.
So our last piece here was just to provide a little bit of an update on our stakeholder engagement and communications plan. So you'll see here our proposed timing. We would like to speak to 3 different groups in a couple different ways. So once the advisory committee or advisory table is fully stood up, we will be engaging on a fairly regular basis just to keep everybody up to speed, make sure that anything that needs to be approved or validated is, and we would likely be continuing to do it in this forum. But if there is a different makeup of members, that might take place not in the open forum, depending on who's at that meeting, of course. So The next group that we are looking to engage is the extended stakeholder network. And we know that you have the HSPCN group that has already done a lot of thinking about these issues and are very interested and keen in being consulted. So we are looking to reach out to them either as a whole with some breakout groups or in smaller focus groups, depending on schedules, and chat with them about their perspectives on this project as well. Finally, as we discussed in the kickoff meeting, we're looking to do some open public consultation. Again, this would be not just an open conversation. There would be very clear objectives laid out and clear questions circulated in advance so that people come understanding what the topic is and what the objectives of the conversation are. And again, this would also likely be through video conference. There's a little bit more of a description of each of the groups and activities, but I'll pause there if there's any questions or flags of groups that we should be adding to the extended stakeholder network. For example, we did capture a few in our kickoff meeting and have noted those.
Are there any questions for anybody? I wonder. Well, I wonder where my idea just went. Poof, gone. You had mentioned about the meetings being publicized or I guess live streamed, and I would lean on the CAO to ask that question. I would have some concerns. I think that there are some conversations around the safety and well-being of the community with the identified stakeholders that could drift slightly into, not privacy issues in terms of naming names or issues, but I would think that the people who are being interviewed in the extended stakeholder network would anticipate some level of confidentiality or freedom to speak freely so that we can build the plan appropriately and correctly for the community. Mike, what do you think about that?
I don't believe that the Municipal Act has any requirement that something like this would be necessarily public. So I don't have any concerns procedurally from those being done confidentially or in a closed loop, so to speak.
Yeah, the outcome of the plan itself and its anticipated outcomes is absolutely the business of the public. But I think that there's certain aspects of how we get there in terms of the stakeholders and the work they do that's involved that requires some liberty there. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I didn't interpret that these would be live streamed or anything like that. It just says video conference because this is the way we're all meeting. And actually it's even if COVID was lifted and we're all back to normal, this is really actually quite easy because you don't have to get in the car, drive anywhere, So they have to be within that closed group, but just through video conference, not public. And there's no, like Mike just said, there's no authority under the Municipal Act because it's not including us. It's not we have quorum of council right now, but not in these sessions.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we're in a funny world right now where everybody seems to think that everything is their business, but in reality it's not. So Councillor DeVola.
Just these timelines that are shown, they appear a bit aggressive given all where we're in, and I'm not disputing that they're achievable, but are they achievable?
So yes, that is something that I would want to address is what flexibility there is on this. We know what our deadline is. Well, we had originally been tracking to June 1st so that we could have input for the OPP Detachment Board, but it is possible now that we can ease up on those slightly since we kind of have a better view of what information is needed to inform those decisions. So would be happy to take these back, revise them, make them give them a little breathing room, and come back to Mike with an updated engagement plan.
Yeah, I think everybody would agree it's important to get the right information to set the plan up properly. And now that we know that the June 7 deadline for the Detachment Board proposal is flexible, that's one thing, but we've landed on 7, so we should be able to meet that deadline and not affect the rest of it. So I think if everyone agrees that you could go back and give yourself some breathing time to get the right people, the right questions in the right timeline. Is everybody okay with that? You know what? It's funny moving from a big screen on your desk to a laptop because everyone's heads are like this big. So it's like looking at ants to see if your hands are in the air. I see Councillor Roberts' hand in the air.
Just one quick thing. So yeah, so it says weeks of May 31st to June 7th. So maybe it could go like June 7th to whichever beyond those next 2 weeks, 14th or something. But given how busy people are and timelines and everything, could you do them in a couple of video conferences? Does it have to be one with everybody, or can it be here's 2 times, pick this once the people are identified, but you know, sign up for this date, or was the anticipation to have it all at once?
No, we're happy to do with the public consultations. I think we had originally thought 4, 1 for each municipality, given the flexibility afforded by video conferencing. If the uptake is not particularly high, we can reduce that number. And then in terms of the extended stakeholder network, I'm happy to offer a couple different options. We want to make sure that people are able to attend and are aware that people have very different schedules. So yeah, we can definitely do that.
Lauren, I know you've spoken a little bit about contextualizing the community dialogue. Are you able to speak a little bit more to what that might look like? I mean, we want to make sure that, as you'd mentioned, that people do understand the purpose and reason of the consultation. And there's lots of things this conversation is not about. Are you able to just clarify or detail a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So what we've done in the past, and I know that John has recently done this in Windsor, so might be able to speak from experience there. But what we've done in the past is basically, without being too onerous, a very simple pre-read. So just whoever has confirmed and is coming, they'll get maybe a 1-pager on what to expect. The scope of the project, we like to do very clearly in scope, out of scope, and make it a little bit visual, so it's super clear of what's on the table. During the actual engagement itself, we use something as basic as like a parking lot. So if somebody brings something up and it's not within scope, we could very easily just table it, but then put a pin in it and let them know that that's just not something that's going to be addressed here. But yeah, no matter what you do, there's always going to be a number of people who show up and probably talk about what they want to talk about anyway. And so it's just a matter of minimizing the floor time that they get without alienating them. So of course, yeah, we have a couple of different techniques for that. And I think the biggest step is really just to simply and clearly explain what we're focused on, what the questions we're looking to answer, and where the information that we're gathering is going from there. Okay, we've talked to you now, so what? And I think that really helps people understand and put a border around what they are coming to talk about.
Yeah, I think you're right. Every community we could probably has folks who either misunderstand or just have an agenda. We could probably give you a list of who to expect and what their topic of choice will be, but we'll leave the surprise to you.
We like those surprises.
Are there any questions from anybody? Oh, John, you go right ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add, I can't remember now. I either did 10 or 12 of these meetings in February, March, down in Windsor, Essex. And honestly, they were great. They were really useful. Each one lasted 90 minutes. We allocated the first 20 minutes or so, in addition to the pre-read that Lauren was describing. The first 20 minutes was a briefing, and it explained the whole theory behind the approach of the community safety well-being plan as being about drawing the connecting links between the different services and trying to move from a culture of incident response to prevention and community development. And so and then there was also a certain amount of like current state reporting, although that probably didn't add very much to the conversation, and as it turned out, because people knew more about and were more expert in the reality of living in their community than could be captured by a small slice of statistics, particularly because a lot of the StatsCan stuff was a couple of years out of date anyway. And so they had a much stronger sense of the reality on the ground than they thought was particularly captured by data, most of which was pre-COVID. But the remainder of the conversation was broken down into, we started off with 5 questions, but we found in reality, people really spoke to 4 or 3. What are the things that contribute to your perception of safety in the community? What are the things that are the opposite that create, so like almost like a strengths and weaknesses kind of conversation. We had a 3rd sub-detailed question about the specific effects of COVID. And then the 4th question was, so having regard to all this, what do you think are the most important things for the plan to consider that would promote community safety? And I think we were really pleasantly surprised by the quality of the participation. The questions really fence people in a little bit. The other thing that we did was we ran the sessions with multiple facilitators, and we used breakout rooms. So, if we had 25 or 30 people show up, we divided them into 3 or 4 groups. So no group had more than 6 or 8 people. And, it was remarkable how well behaved people were too. It's hard to thump up the table when you're in such a small group and in your own living room, and you're talking to other people who are in their own living room. It was all conversational. It was all really super pleasant. And I think, the overwhelming sense of people who participated was, boy, that was kind of fun. In a lot of cases, the 90 minutes just went like that. So I suspect we'd have no worse equality of participation in your communities. And I'd look forward to them as being quite optimistic, honestly.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you. And I know that in our last meeting, you had clarified a little bit about this as well. And I think I will confess that in the beginning, when this whole idea of the plan came out, I was, sort of all skeptical and how is this going to work? And it's terrible. And it's just one more layer. But as I've attended the webinars and learned more about it, I find it, quite exciting to be able to go through the process and build a plan that has the right people basically doing the right things for the right reasons for the greater good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Whereas a couple of years ago, I don't think I was. So I'll be very honest. Are there any questions or comments from anybody else on the screen at the moment, or else Lauren can continue? Okay, Lauren, away you go then. Thanks.
All right. We might be able to cut this meeting on a Friday before a long weekend in half, which is pretty great. So next steps, it sounds like you're on your way to formalizing the advisory committee on the 26th. We can work with you to kind of finalize that OPP detachment piece. It sounds like we're leaning towards 7, but that needs to just be firmed up and submitted by the 7th. We have been working with Mike, and he has connected us with multiple data contacts. So we are gathering whatever data we can just to start getting that initial analysis on the way, and that'll kind of feed into some of the things that we bring up at the other consultations that we do. We will develop and disseminate and obviously share all of the materials that go out for public consultation, just to make sure that it's on track with your expectations. Same with, it's for public consultation, ESN, extended stakeholder group, all the material will be shared and approved. And then we don't really have a set date for our next set of meetings with either the advisory committee or strategy or a steering committee, but the expectation is that it will be on a regular basis and as needed to make sure that you are all well apprised of what's going on and are validating each step of the way. And that's
That's
all
terrific.
I got.
Okay, and any questions, comments from anybody else on the steering committee about those next steps? Great. So is that it for you then, Lauren?
That was it, unless my colleagues have anything that they would like to add.
Anybody?
Looks like no.
Okay. Well, so you'll come back to us with some revised timelines, and is there a plan for a next meeting of this group? Or, I mean, our next steps as council members is our discussion about the potential appointments next week. And then what happens after that? I don't know whether, Lauren, that's to you or whether that's Mike. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We give those folks names to you.
I was going to just say that Mike and I will work together on setting the next date. So we'll probably just start getting our heads down on some of the actual data analysis and setting up all of the engagement. And I'll talk to Mike. We'll talk to Mike about when the most logical point is to meet. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, and with respect to what happens, I think the chair and I have I guess, created a draft list of names that could potentially be appointed to the advisory committee. If council approve those or make some other suggestions, I would suggest that I would approach those people then just to gauge their interest and let them ensure that they know what they're signing up for and see if they are in fact interested in serving, and then report back to council, and we could appoint them by bylaw. But as long as they are prepared to serve, I think they could effectively start to work immediately. So before all the formal appointments are done. So I think right after next Wednesday, I would propose to reach out to the individuals that we council chooses, and then we can get moving.
Okay, that's terrific. John, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to make one other comment, and perhaps I could invite Matt to build on it once I'm done. And Lauren, could you just pop back to slide 8 for me? Because we focused on the who, but it's worth just thinking about the responsibilities of the advisory committee. The Police Services Act hasn't rewritten the Municipal Act or any other piece of legislation in regards to the normal governance about who makes decisions about spending envelopes. There's no attempt here to create a new parallel government. But if you look at the bullets in the left-hand column, it could totally make your eyebrow raise and say, well, just how exactly is this going to work that a bunch of people who we've appointed to this committee are going to, like, some of them are quite innocuous, right? Like, and are actually hugely valuable contributions, things like leading community engagement and, when you say determining priorities of the plan, that, suggests two things. What should the plan be that, as it's recommended to the decision makers, but it's not so much the making of the decisions, I guess. Ensuring that outcomes are established and responsibilities for measurement are in place. That's a serious value add that comes from technicians, because the public isn't going to tell you that. You really need to know how to measure things. Ensuring that each activity is achievable, that's something you really need expertise to help do. But it's interesting when it goes on to say owning, evaluating, and monitoring the plan. Suggesting that this isn't just a committee to help create a plan the way you'd normally think of it. It's about changing and breaking down silos and creating a permanently changed culture, and then aligning implementation and evaluation with the planning cycle and other relevant planning and budgeting activities. I think that bullet is kind of the guarantee that the people who wrote this understood that that you guys didn't just retire and leave these folks in charge, right? Like, there's the operational aspects of the plan, which operate within existing structures and existing frameworks and existing budgets. And then there's the more evolutionary stuff where somebody might say, well, you know what, we really need to fix this gap. And that gap might be in funding, or that gap might be in collaboration, or it might be in information sharing. It could be in any number of places. So it just occurs to me that when I look at that, the box on the right is really good at telling you what stakeholders need to be engaged so that you can break down the silos. And the box on the left gives you a real strong insight into the kind of people who you need. It gives you a sense of the expertise, but also the flexibility. Because I loved what you said before, Madam Mayor, about a couple of years ago, you weren't so sure about this, but now it seems kind of exciting. I got to tell you, that is exactly the same journey I went on, because when I first looked at it, I just looked at it as a sort of a bizarre incursion into regular municipal decision-making and potentially into regular decision-making in other places. And increasingly, I look at it as a really positive way to bust up silos that get in the way of serving the public. But between now and then, there's going to be a need for all kinds of really flexible thinking and collaborative, iterative work. And so I think when you're thinking about who would be perfect, you should be thinking about people who have a kind of a demonstrated commitment to kind of understanding how to color inside the lines, understanding what lines to recommend erasing, understanding, people who might be prepared to jump over some lines every now and again, but only with the appropriate authority. It's going to take a huge amount of subtlety to really achieve everything that this can achieve, which is why it's so exciting. But it's not going to be an easy task. And so I really appreciated everything you were saying before about, for the police services representation, why it's so important to have the right mix of continuity and authority and on the ground know-how. And I think you probably want to think about that as you think about all the people, because if this thing is going to work, it's got to really have the right folks. And Matt, you may just want to comment on that, because I do think it's the vision of what these boards are supposed to be is something that I think you really have to puzzle about them a lot until you really start to get it, and their evolution into the whole situation table model and all that kind of thing. And I've certainly learned a lot from Matt over the last year about the vision behind it. So Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I really don't. I think you covered it extremely well, John. The responsibilities of the advisory committee that you described, excuse me, on the left-hand side, and the fact that what's envisaged is that this is ongoing, it's evergreen. The responsibility doesn't end with the plan. And in fact, when you put the plan together with the representation that you described, and it could be others, this is just an example, that now we have a coordinated approach to whether it's initiatives or programs or policies or anything at a local level, but we have some coordinated approach to that, where at the end of the day, and you've heard me say before, this is about not just collaborating and making sure that we're addressing through, I'll call it public policy, but it's more localized than that, but addressing what's required, what's needed at a local level, specific to that local municipality, and doing so well before this becomes a greater problem for everyone. Then we end up actually seeing that the cost curve for a very expensive service like policing can actually bend downwards, and there may be other costs that bend down as well. But at the end of the day, this is about seeing and realizing greater outcomes for the community, and this is the design of what you're seeing in front of you. So I think you've covered it really well.
Thank you. And I think it'll be interesting too, if there's only one flag that we know that each of the sectors that are named as required participants never have enough human or financial resources attached to the work they do and the necessary work that they do. And so if you take the sectors in the right-hand box and connect it to the second last bullet in the left-hand box, aligning implementation and evaluation of the plan with the municipal planning cycle and other relevant planning and budgeting activities to ensure alignment of partner resources and strategies, it's easy to anticipate a collision of values not in terms of the needs of the community or wanting to help the community, but in the municipal ability to resource the needs. So we also need to make sure that the people we appoint fully understand that they have some enough political acuity and understanding to realize that municipalities, just are not a deep pocket to be picked for the magic panacea for everything that's wrong in all those sectors. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but there's never enough money or people. So that's going to be, to me, one of the biggest jobs is the aligning of philosophies to do the best you can with what you have, as opposed to the people who are going to own, evaluate, and monitor the plan saying, well, we could do a lot better job if we had $40 million, because everybody can do better if they had $40 million. So anyway, we'll see how we go. But there's, like you say, there's heavy days ahead. Is there anything else that we need to talk about? I think, Lauren, you're at the end of your slides, are you not? Mike, do we need a resolution to receive the report or not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
They just formed the agenda.
All right, so we'll hear from you about next steps going forward. Council will talk about potential appointees next Wednesday, and it is 12:53 on the Friday of a long weekend. Andrea, go ahead.
Just so, and we're okay with the extension for the dates. Everybody was fine with that. So there's no mad rush to get those conference dates or video conference dates set, right? Okay.
I found it never to be a best practice to tell a consultant that there's no rush. So.
I was going to say, I'm not used to that.
Fair enough. Well, we're nice people here in Halliburton. Okay, well, that being said, I would ask then for a mover and a seconder to adjourn. I guess we just need a mover to adjourn, don't we? Dave, you're there. So motion to adjourn by Councillor Burton. So we are adjourned. Enjoy your long weekend, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, be safe.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.